So let's get into these running backs here a little bit. Sort of like we talked about with the quarterbacks, the top 5 running backs PPR wise last season: Christian McCaffrey, Aaron Jones, Ezekiel Elliott, Austin Eckler, Derrick Henry. So I'll ask you the same thing that I asked you on Tuesday. Which one of these guys is most likely to fall out of the top 5, and who would be the person or persons to replace him?
Well, Aaron Jones is a lock. Like, he's no chance.
Are you saying 19 touchdowns is not going to be repeatable?
Not happening. So Aaron Jones is an easy candidate. I love Austin Eckler. He's a friend. I think he's awesome. I don't know if he's going to be a top 5 running back.
Mm-hmm.
I could see Derrick Henry falling out of the top 5 too. Right. And not because he's not tremendous, but I just feel like Dalvin Cook is gonna get bumped up. And if you look at the points per game average last year, it was McCaffrey, and then it was Dalvin Cook. The difference was crazy. It was like almost 9 points more, from Dalvin. So Zeke's going to end up back there. Saquon's going to end up back up in the top 5. I mean, I could see Kamara ending up back in the top 5 as well. So right now, my top 5 backs are CMC, Barkley, Zeke, Cook, and Kamara, and then I've got Henry, Eckler, Mixon, Sanders, and Jones. I could see Miles Sanders being the top 5 running back if things go right for him. Super, super talented. In the games where Jordan Howard was out last year, he averaged over 21 touches per game, averaged over 20 fantasy points per game. So he could be a featured back at the next level. He's shown that. So even though it's a small sample size, there are 3 guys, and maybe 4 if Cook can avoid injuries, that are locked and loaded as top 5 guys. Although, wouldn't it be crazy if McCaffrey fell out of the top 5 and succumbed to that curse of 370 at the running back position? That would blow a big hole into this position at the top.
Yeah, no, that would be wild. It's just funny too, because I know I've heard some people say or seen some people ask whether or not they should take McCaffrey at number 1. Can he repeat? And my response to that is take him at number 1, because even if he doesn't finish as the number 1 running back, it seems pretty likely that he will still finish within the top 5. Like, I feel like just because you draft a guy at number 1 doesn't mean you need him to finish at number 1. You just want him to be in that range of, position 1, QB1, RB1, whatever it is. You just want him to finish in that range. So if I take CMC at 1 overall and he finishes as the RB3 or whatever, I'm fine. Like, everything's going to be okay. You mentioned guys sliding in. Alvin Kamara was sort of the guy that I had pegged to kind of come back in there, because I know last year the only thing that frustrated with him was that he just didn't score touchdowns. He went until the end of the season. Yeah, end of the season, like, he scored a few touchdowns, but before that, he just really didn't. But everything else was kind of on par with his first couple of years. The number of touches was about the same. The yards maybe a little bit less, but not dramatically less than what we had seen the first couple of years. It's just that the first 2 years he scored a combined 31 touchdowns. Last year he scored 6. I think that number comes up again, so I could very much see him sliding back into the top 5. I do agree. I think Austin Eckler, he was incredibly efficient, especially catching the football. I don't know that that's going to be the case necessarily again this year. Maybe he makes up for it in volume, but I just think his efficiency comes down, and so that hurts him a little bit. Aaron,
top 10, but not top 5.
Yeah, top 5 I think is going to be hard. Aaron Jones, you're right. The 19 touchdowns, I think everybody is basically saying, yes, that's just not going to happen again.
Right.
I still think he can score like 8 to 10, which is a really great season.
That'd be great. Dude. I take it all day long.
You're still talking about if he scores 9 touchdowns this year, that's still 60 points fewer. If everything else is the same, that's still 60 fewer points.
It's a boatload
from Aaron Jones. That's a lot. That is absolutely a lot for him. There are plenty of running backs, and I know we've kicked around plenty. Are there guys right now that aren't getting enough run, that aren't getting enough attention, that maybe we should be talking about a little bit more?
I mean, that's hard for us to say because we talk about
all of them. I know, right?
So much. So I guess if I could throw a few names out there, we're still talking about Kenyon Drake, but Kenyon Drake could legitimately end up being a top 10 running back next season easily. If you look at the numbers he put up during his time in Arizona. I know that there has been more than one occasion where we've been all in on Drake and he has not performed, but this situation seems to be different in Arizona. Really good fit for the offense. No real competition for backfield touches there with David Johnson now gone. So Kenyon Drake, I feel like he's getting respect, maybe not enough respect at the position. I also feel like David Montgomery is not getting talked about enough. I feel like he could end up being a decent draft bargain because people remember what he did or didn't do last season.
Right.
But I feel like the Bears need to run the football effectively to have any chance, especially, with that quarterback position being what it is. And Montgomery, I think baked into his value right now is the fact that he didn't produce like we thought he would as a rookie. And Nagy likes to use a pass catching running back in Tariq Cohen. So if you can get Montgomery as your running back 3 and he produces running back 2 numbers, then, that's a bit of a win. Raheem Mostert is another player from your beloved 49ers. Tevin Coleman's there. Jerick McKinnon, I don't know what's going on with him, but Matt Breida got traded to Miami. Like Raheem Mostert in the second half of last season was like
he was the guy.
Yeah. He was lit, man. He was really, really good. So I feel like Mostert is someone too that, like, if you're one of the types of people who likes to wait on running backs, which I don't think is a good idea, but he could end up being like that, that zero RB target, the same to go with David Montgomery at that position.
Yeah, Montgomery's the guy you mentioned. If you can get him as an RB3 and he comes back with RB2 value, I think I'd be great.
Can too. Yeah,
I think he'd be great with that. I was a guy who was big on him last year, and I sort of held on to that maybe a little bit, maybe a couple weeks too long, kind of held on to that belief with him. My fear with him is that he is a lot closer to his ceiling than I think we originally anticipated. That I think he's got a little bit more to grow than what we saw last year, but maybe not much more. So I do think RB2 value is probably maybe the tops with him, but I would like to see him get there. And if I can get him as a third running back and I maybe flex him occasionally, I feel okay with that. I do think a guy that maybe we're not talking about quite as much, I feel like Chris Carson's another one of those names that just sort of hangs around and we always try to find reasons to fade Chris Carson and he just keeps coming through all the time. I mean,
it's all about that hip. If he's good,
yes,
then that ADP will rise. Yes.
I mean, remember last year, it feels like week 3 or 4, he had fumbled a few times and we were all afraid that Rashad Penny was going to come take over that job. And that never really happened. It just never really did. Carson held on to it, was solid all year long. And again, I think he's one of those guys that people will look at. I said Chris Carson this year is sort of what I felt about Leonard Fournette last year, that you'll be sitting there probably in round 3 or so, and Carson he'll just kind of fall into your lap, and you may reluctantly take him, and then he'll end up putting up good numbers for you. And I think again, he's not a guy that you think of as a pass catcher, but he does so many other things well. That I think he probably deserves a little bit more attention than he's getting. I feel like the rest of these guys we've sort of kind of covered in some form or fashion. Maybe Josh Jacobs, I don't know, we could talk about more, but I just want the Raiders to throw him the ball more, and I don't know why they don't.
Right, but look at what they've done though in the offseason. Right, you add Lynn Bowden, you add Devontae Booker, Jalen Richard is still on the roster, so there was reports that they were kicking the tires on McCoy and Frank Gore. Right. So, you might be hearing them say we want to get Josh Jacobs more involved in the passing game, but the moves that they've made might signal otherwise.
Right. And I don't get it because I think it's a skill that he has. And I would like them to utilize that more because that makes his value even greater. I mean, I think he's a guy who's going to be outstanding this year anyway, but man, if they start throwing him the football,
and Gruden has liked to use that sort of back in the past. I mean, remember Charlie Garner?
Yeah, absolutely.
So, I mean,
why they don't do it now, I don't understand.
Hopefully that is the case and that they do give him the football, and some of these moves that they've made are not sort of confusing us to the role that Jacobs could play as a pass catcher.
Yeah, who knows? I feel like this is going to be an easier one, though. Which guys are we overhyping? I know we talked a little bit on Tuesday about Jonathan Taylor and where
that's
he's
the
going.
one, man.
I mean, there have got to be some guys out there that we are just way too high on right now.
So, you could, and a lot of it's the rookies too, right? So, for me, are we overhyping Cam Akers because there's 2 other backs that he's going to have to compete with? Are we overhyping Keyshawn Vaughn?
Right.
And I think he's the best running back sleeper in that class because of where he ended up. But are we overvaluing him? If you look at some of the earlier on, were we overhyping Clyde Edwards-Helaire, and now it's sort of a little bit backed off. Were we overhyping Devin Singletary, and then they brought in Zach Moss, and maybe that sort of put a bit of a ceiling on where he'll be drafted based on what his real value is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, definitely the rookies I think are very high on that list.
It always happens.
Maybe too much run. It does. It always happens. I think at some point it will kind of level out a little bit. I think especially, if we get some form of training camp and we see how some of these backs, because like a lot of these rookie backs are in ostensibly committee situations, right? I mean, Jonathan Taylor has Marlon Mack to deal with and possibly Naheem Hines. Edwards-Helaire still has Damian Williams to deal with. DeAndre Swift has Kerryon Johnson to deal with. So I think as we see some of these teams sort of working together, we may have a better idea of how that works.
Marcus, are we, and it's not like overhyping, but I mean, he's ranked in the top 10 a lot. Nick Chubb.
I was just about to mention him. I was just about to mention Nick Chubb.
First 8 games last year, great. Awesome. 6 touchdowns, well over 100 yards per game on the ground, getting involved in the passing game. Last 8 games, 2 touchdowns, fewer rushing yards per game, way fewer fantasy points per game. In fact, if you project his numbers over 8 games with Kareem Hunt into a 16-game slate, he's not a top 10 running back. He's not a top 15 running back.
Right.
So, and I'm like, Kareem Hunt is a knucklehead off the field. At least he had, that incident. He's a freaking good running back, bro.
Really good football player.
He's a really good. I mean, he was an elite fantasy running back in Kansas City. And so I when I see Nick Chubb get drafted in the first round, I'm like, I don't want that. I'm not going there.
Yeah, I was looking at that. And those were literally going to be the next words out of my mouth when you asked it, because I do feel like, we are looking at Nick Chubb from the first half of the season and sort of ignoring what happened in the back half, and just kind of look, they're going to get a full year out of Kareem Hunt. And I still believe they want to build this team around Baker Mayfield. I still truly believe that they want to put the ball in his hands and let him be successful. And I think part of the reason we saw Chubb get so much work early is because Mayfield was struggling so much early in the season that at some point they couldn't just keep letting him throw the football because it was destroying the offense there. So I think if all these other factors come into play this year, Nick Chubb maybe won't get the same level of work that we saw, early in the season last year. So yeah, I'm sort of with you. I know he has that late kind of first round, early second round ADP right now, and I just don't know. Don't know. Which guys do you think the hardest to project this year? My immediate thought is we talk about the rookies and how they're getting overhyped. I feel like that makes it hard to sort of project the guys that they're paired with, the Kerryons, the Damian Williamses, all those guys, the Marlon Macks. I feel like it makes them harder to sort of project just because we're still trying to wade through the hype fog that has come with some of these rookies right now. Am I weird?
What about Mark Ingram, dude?
Mark Ingram's another one. Yeah, J.K. Dobbins.
J.K. Dobbins, man. I dig him in Dynasty. I'm a big fan of his long term. But yeah, I mean, like even to a point, Devin Singletary, who I mentioned earlier, like how much is Zach Moss going to eat into his, goal line opportunities, early down work? That's a bit of an issue. And any team that has the look of a committee scenario. So like even the Rams, like as much as we like Cam Akers, there's no guarantee that he's going to see the majority of the backfield touches because Malcolm Brown and Darrell Henderson are still in there. You even mentioned, with the Colts, like Frank Reich is talking up Naheem Hines, like he's going to come out and catch 60 balls out of the backfield.
Right.
And we know Jonathan Taylor is not a guy who's going to catch a ton of passes. And how much does that take him off the field? And Marlon Mack is still there. So like, that's another situation where as much as we love Jonathan Taylor, he's not guaranteed a featured role. In fact, it looks like he's not going to have a featured role. He'll end up being the top guy in a backfield committee. Melvin Gordon's another one, right?
That was the name. That was the name I was looking at. Was Melvin Gordon? Yeah.
Melvin Gordon's a really good player. He's been a tremendous fantasy running back for most of his career, outside of his rookie campaign where he didn't score a touchdown, which is still crazy to think about.
Right.
Philip Lindsay is still there. Royce Freeman is still there, and we all think that Gordon's an RB2, and he'll get enough opportunities to sort of make good on that level, but. I mean, how many times is Philip Lindsay gonna be put in a game and get the hot hand, and Gordon stays on the bench? Like, right. I mean, it's possible that's a scenario that's certainly possible. So the talent that's come through in the draft, plus some of the moves that got made during the offseason at the running back position, has made some of these teams' backfields really tough to project.
Yeah, no doubt. Like I said, the Melvin Gordon one was good. I also throw, for multiple reasons, Le'Veon Bell sort of into that. I know that, I think a lot of people are just sort of bleh, and just kind of off
That's
that
where I'm at
bandwagon.
too, yeah.
I think it is. I mean, because I look at it as like he still is a talented player. He's just in an offense that is stuck in mud, and with a head coach that doesn't seem to really want him around.
Yeah.
And now they've got Frank Gore there. Like it's just, sometimes bad things happen to good players, and I feel like this is one of those things. A bad thing has happened to a good player. We just don't know what to do about it.
Yeah.
If there's one running back you could target, and maybe outside, let's say outside like the top three, right? So like no, McCaffrey, no Barkley, no Zeke, whatever. Even throw Derrick Henry in there, right? And outside of those top four guys, is there one running back you feel like you would love to target at all costs this year?
I want Miles Sanders. I just feel like he's going to be the guy, and I like what I saw from him last season. We all know that he didn't get the hype out of Penn State because he was playing behind Saquon, and then that final season with the Nittany Lions, he showed that he could be a featured back. He showed that he could be a top back at the next level last year in the 5 games without Jordan Howard, averaging over 20 fantasy points per game. There's really Boston Scott and Corey Clement right now in Philadelphia. So as long as that sort of remains status quo and the Eagles don't go out there and sign a big name running back and sort of ruin my projections for Miles Sanders, I would really like to be able to grab this kid. And the bad news is that if you're in leagues like we are, where everyone's a shark and knows what they're doing,
it's hard,
man. Like he's getting picked like in the top 12 and 15 at this point. So depending on where you are in your draft, you may not have an opportunity to get him, but I really do like what he brings to the table. Versatile guy who can do it in all 3 aspects.
I will say that if I decide to start drafts, running back, which is probably likely, even if I decide to go 3 running backs in a row, if I could make that 3rd running back David Johnson, I think I'd be really excited. I've kind of gotten back on that bandwagon just because in Houston, the opportunity is going to be there. He's going to be, the lead back there. I like Duke Johnson, but they've shown that they're not willing to necessarily make Duke Johnson a featured player in that offense. They're still going to throw the ball a lot because they've got Deshaun Watson at quarterback, but I think DJ can get his pass, his targets there. He can get his touches as a running back. And I think this is kind of a bounce back. As long as he's healthy, as long as the back is okay, he's had time to rest it. I think he's going to have kind of a nice bounce back season. I could see him getting over 1,000 rushing yards, maybe getting 1,200-1,300 total yards, and 6 to 8 touchdowns. I think as a 2nd or 3rd running back, I think that's a pretty good thing, and I would I'd definitely be on board with that.
Yep, me too.
You got any running back hot takes for 2020?
Let's see. I will say J.K. Dobbins will have more fantasy points than Mark Ingram. I think Keyshawn Vaughn could end up being a top 15 fantasy running back. So I gave you 2.
Yeah.
And I do believe in Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Even though Damian Williams is in the mix, let's not forget Damian Williams scored 21% of his fantasy points on 2 plays last season, and the Chiefs did not draft Clyde to end up being in a committee that shows him as the 2nd option. Eventually, the talent will rise, the cream will rise to the top, and Clyde Edwards-Helaire will be a very reliable fantasy running back week in and week out.
So my hot take is, by the end of the year, Darrynton Evans in Tennessee will be on a lot of fantasy rosters.
Oh, that's bad news if you've got Derrick Henry.
Because I think it'll happen mostly as a pass catcher, that they will use him to catch the football out of the backfield, because for all the things Derrick Henry does well, catching the football isn't necessarily one of them. And I think Darrynton Evans is going to get on the field. I think he's going to get some work. And I think he's the guy that I've been targeting in a couple of dynasty spots, just because, look, Derrick Henry's on the franchise tag this year. I can't imagine the Titans are going to want to double down on that next year. And we know that the current NFL climate does not allow for paying running backs big money. So I could see Evans kind of working into a kind of a smaller role this year, having that expand, and maybe next year the Titans looking around and saying, "Hey, look, we're going to give you a bigger opportunity, kid." So that's my hot take, is that by the end of the year, people are going to be clamoring for him, and there are going to be fights on the waiver wire to try to get Darrynton Evans at some point during the season to help their fantasy roster.
Hot take.